Chapter 2, Their Adventure in the Cottage Without a Door. Next morning, the brownies set out on their journey. They soon passed the borders of fairyland and found themselves in the lands outside. For a long, long time they walked and met nobody at all. "I am getting hungry," sighed Hop. "So am I," said Skip. "Well, look, there's a cottage," said Jump. "We'll go and ask if we can have something to eat. Have you got any money, Hop?" Hop felt in his pockets. "Not a penny," he answered. "Oh dear, nor have I," said Skip. "What are we going to do then?" asked Jump. "Perhaps there's someone kind living in the cottage who'll give us some breakfast for nothing." The three brownies went up to the little cottage. It was surrounded by trees and its front door was painted a very beautiful bright blue. Hop knocked loudly. "Who's knocking at my door?" asked a deep voice. "3 hungry brownies," answered Hop boldly. "Come in," said the voice. Hop opened the door and the brownies went in. Clap! The door swung to behind them and made them jump. Hop looked around to see who had shut the door. But to his enormous surprise, he could see no door at all, and yet they'd just come in by one. "Good gracious," he cried, "wherever has the door gone?" "Hee hee," chuckled a deep voice. "It's gone where you won't find it. I've got you prisoners now, 3 nice little servants to work for me all day." Hop, Skip and Jump looked most astonished. This was a fine sort of welcome. Then they saw an old bent wizard huddled up by the cottage fire laughing at them. "We're not your prisoners, so please let us go," said Hop. "All right, go," laughed the wizard. But search as they would, the brownies couldn't find any door at all. There were blank walls all around them. Then they knew that they were prisoners indeed. "Now listen," said the wizard. "I will give you your meals and in return you must work for me. I have a great many spells I want copied out. Sit down at that table and begin work at once." The 3 brownies obeyed. They knew that it was best not to anger such a powerful wizard. He brought them each a great book of magic and set it down beside them. "Begin at page 1, he said, and if you make me a fair copy of all the books without one single mistake, perhaps I will let you go." "Oh dear," groaned Jump. "Why, the books have got about 1,000 pages each." The 3 brownies set to work, and very difficult it was too, for the wizard wrote so badly that they could hardly read his writing in the big magic books. All day they wrote, and all the wizard gave them to eat was a large turnip. The brownies kept looking around to see if the door came back again, but alas, it didn't. That night, when the wizard was snoring on his bed, the 3 brownies began whispering together. "We must escape somehow," said Hop. "But how?" whispered Skip and Jump. None of them could think of a plan at all. "It's no good thinking of escaping until we find out about the disappearing door," groaned Hop. "The wizards barred the window right across. We'd better go to sleep." So off to sleep they went, and were wakened up very early the next morning by the wizard, who wanted his breakfast. After that, they had to sit down and copy out the magic books again. It was dreadfully dull work. But suddenly, Hop found he was copying out something that made his heart beat with excitement. It was about disappearing doors. "A disappearing door will come back if a wizard's green stick is swung 3 times in the air and dropped," said the book. Hop's hand shook as he copied it out. "If only the wizard's stick is green and I could get hold of it whilst he's asleep," he thought. He turned around to look at the stick. Yes, it was green, sure enough, but the wizard was holding it tightly in his hand. But when he's asleep, he'll put it down, thought Hop, longing to tell Skip and Jump what he discovered. That night, he watched the wizard carefully, but oh, how disappointed he was to see that he went to bed with his stick still held in his hand. "I'd be sure to wake him up if I tried to get his stick," thought Hop, and he whispered to Skip and Jump all that he had thought of during the day. They were most excited. "Oh, do let's try to get his stick," whispered Skip. "If only we could get out of this horrid cottage." "And if only we could go back to dear old fairyland," whispered Jump with tears in his eyes. Now, Hop was the bravest of the brownies, and he couldn't bear to see Jump crying. I'll go and see if I can possibly get the stick, he said. Stay here and don't make a sound. Then the brave little brownie crept quietly across the floor until he reached the wizard's bed. Went the wizard. Carefully, Hop put up his hand and felt in the bedclothes for the green stick. But oh my, no sooner did he catch hold of it than what do you think happened? Why, that stick jumped straight out of bed by itself and began to chase poor Hop all around the room, rapping him on his knuckles and hitting him on the back until Hop began to yell in pain and fright. The wizard woke up. He sat up in bed and chuckled. Hee hee, he laughed. So you were trying to steal my stick, were you? Well, you won't do that again in a hurry. Poor Hop was running all over the place trying to get out of the way of the stick, which chased him into corners and gave him a good whipping as he'd ever had in his life. Come back, stick, at last said the wizard, and the stick jumped back into bed with him. Hop ran over to the others. This all comes of our last naughty trick at the king's palace, he sobbed. If only we could go back to Brownie Town, I'd never be bad again. After that, the brownies knew it was no good trying to get the stick away from the wizard. They were much too afraid of it. We must think of something else, sighed Skip. Each night, the brownies whispered together, but no plan could they think of at all. Then, one day, the wizard had a visitor. He was a red goblin and the ugliest little fellow you could think of. He didn't come in by the vanished door, nor by the window, so the brownies thought he must have jumped down the chimney. Good morning, he said to the wizard. Have you those spells you were going to give me? Oh, they're not ready yet, answered the wizard, so humbly and politely that the brownies pricked up their ears. Oh, they thought, this red goblin must be someone more powerful than the wizard, for the wizard seems quite frightened of him. Not ready, growled the goblin. Well, see that they are ready by tomorrow, or I'll spirit you away to the highest mountain in the world. The wizard shivered and shook and told the goblin he would be sure to have the spells ready by the next day. Mind you do, said the wizard, and jumped straight up the chimney. The brownie stared open-mouthed. Then Hop had a wonderful idea. He turned to the wizard. That goblin is much cleverer than you, isn't he? He said. Pooh! Growled the wizard angrily. I can do things he can't do. Can you really? Asked Hop, opening his eyes very wide. What can you do? Well, I can make myself as big as a giant, said the wizard. That's a wonderful thing, said Hop. Let's see you do it then. Yes, let's, said Skip and Jump, seeing that Hop was following out an idea he had suddenly thought of. The wizard muttered a few words and rubbed his forehead with some ointment out of a purple box. And all at once he began to grow enormously big. Bump! His head touched the ceiling, so the wizard sat down on the floor. Still he went on growing, until once again his head touched the ceiling, and he filled the cottage from wall to wall. The three brownies had to jump on the windowsill to get out of his way. Wonderful, wonderful, cried Hop, clapping his hands. You're a giant! The wizard looked pleased. He muttered something else and quickly grew smaller until he reached his own size again. That will teach you to say that the goblin is cleverer than I am. Oh, but perhaps the goblin can make himself smaller than you can, said Hop. The wizard snorted crossly. That he can't, he said. Why, I can make myself small enough to sit in that pudding basin. Surely not, Hop, Skip and Jump said together. I'll show you, said the wizard, and he rubbed some ointment on his forehead out of a yellow box, and at once he began to shrink. Smaller and smaller he grew until he was the size of a doll. Put me on the table, he squeaked to the brownie, and Skip put him there. He jumped into the pudding basin and sat down. Wonderful, wonderful, cried Hop. You can grow smaller, of course. That I can, squeaked the wizard. Small enough to sit in a teacup, asked Hop. The wizard rubbed some more ointment on his forehead, and he grew smaller still and jumped into a teacup. Simply marvellous, said Hop, Skip and Jump. I can grow smaller still, squeaked the wizard. What, Small enough to creep into this little bottle? Asked Hop, pretending to be greatly surprised and holding out a tiny bottle. The wizard laughed and at once became very tiny indeed, so tiny that he was able to creep through the neck of the little bottle and sit in it easily. Then, quick as a flash, Hop picked up the cork and corked up the bottle. "Ha!" he cried in great excitement. "Now I've got you, now you can't get out." The wizard shouted and yelled in his bottle and struggled and kicked against the cork, but it wasn't a bit of good. "You're a wicked wizard," said Skip, "and now you've got your punishment." "Where's the wizard's stick?" asked Jump, looking around. "Oh, there it is, leaning up against his chair. Perhaps the wizard is powerful now and his stick will be harmless to us." He picked it up. It did nothing at all but behaved just like an ordinary stick. "Now to get out of here," said Jump. He swung the green stick 3 times into the air and let it fall to the ground. At once the blue door appeared in one of the walls. "Hooray!" cried Skip and flung it open. "Now we're free!" But dear me, what a surprise they got when they opened the door. For instead of being among the trees in the wood, it now stood on a sandy beach, and in front of the 3 brownies stretched a calm blue sea. "Good gracious," they cried, "what an extraordinary thing! The cottage must have been travelling for days." They looked out over the blue sea, and not a sail was to be seen. "Well, I don't want to go exploring along this part of the country any more," said Jump, "in case we meet any more unpleasant wizards. I wish we could sail away on the sea." "I know," cried Hop. "Let's get the table out of the cottage and turn it upside down." "And use the tablecloth for a sail," shouted Skip, "and the magic stick for a mast." So into the cottage they went again and dragged out the big table. They turned it upside down in the water and it floated beautifully. Then they set up the mast and fastened the tablecloth for a sail. "Bring some of that purple and yellow ointment," called Hop to Skip. "It might come in useful." So the 2 boxes of ointment were fetched and Hop put them into his pocket. Then, picking up the bottle with the angry little wizard still inside it, he pushed off their table boat, jumped onto it, and they were the brownies safe and sound on the calm blue sea. A tiny little breeze took them along, and they watched the wizard's cottage grow smaller and smaller in the distance. "We'll keep the wizard with us," said Hop. "He might come in useful somehow, and so long as he's corked in the bottle, he's quite harmless." So he slipped the little bottle into his pocket along with the boxes of ointment. On and on they went, rocking softly over the sea, till one by one they grew drowsy, and soon, in the afternoon sun, they fell asleep, whilst their queer little boat went sailing dreamily on. And that's the end of chapter 2. Tomorrow's chapter is called Their Adventure in the Castle of the Red Goblin.